Hello and welcome to a new Cardfight Vanguard video. So I've been a Cardfight Vanguard YouTuber for quite a while now, and one of the video recommendations I've gotten more than once at least is an idea to make a video aimed at newcomers, people who maybe don't know very much about Cardfight Vanguard and kind of want to learn more so that they can get into it themselves. And I think right now is the perfect time to make that video, honestly, and that's exactly what I'm going to be doing. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about what Cardfight Vanguard is, how to start, and a little bit of history about the history of the franchise, basically, so that you'll hopefully know enough about Cardfight Vanguard to make your own decisions as to how you want to approach it, because there's a lot to do. There's a lot to watch, there's a lot to play, and I kind of want to give you as much information as I can. This will not be a tutorial video. So Cardfight Vanguard, as you could probably guess, is a card game first and foremost. And I could make a video about how to play, I might do that in the future, but that is not what this video is. This video is more so a very quick, brief introduction as to what it even is in the first place. So without further ado, let's go. So yeah, Cardfight Vanguard is a card game. You could probably tell that by the title. And it's currently entering its new era, I guess. So if you're familiar with other card games like Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon, you'll understand that they each have different eras or generations to them that focus on different mechanics and gameplay and formats and stuff. So effectively, what is happening right now is Vanguard is entering its fourth major sort of generation. So you know how Yu-Gi-Oh! Has its different generations, one of them focuses on Link summoning, another one focuses on Pendulum summoning. The newest current Yu-Gi-Oh! Generation is more focused on Rush dueling. Same thing goes for Pokemon. There was the X and Y generation that focused on EXs. Then you had your GXs with Sun and Moon, and now you have your V cards with Sword and Shield. Cardfight Vanguard is kind of like that, basically, where it has different kind of generations that the game goes through, each of which focus on different gameplay mechanics. And right now, we are just heading into the Overdress era, which I would say is the fourth of these generations. It hasn't technically really started yet in English. It has in Japan, but over here, it begins on May 14th, as you can see here. And with it, we'll release 5 starter decks. So basically, you can probably guess the starter decks are products where if you buy them, they will give you one full deck of cards that you will be able to play with straight out the box. It will give you everything you need to start playing. And the cool thing about these is that they're very cheap. The retail cost is 333 yen, which, as you can see here, roughly translates to $4 US. And I think over here in the UK, that's around about £3.50. The thing that bushiroad, the creators of the game, said in regards to pricing the decks is they wanted it to be around about the same price as an average pack of cards, because they wanted it to be a very low barrier for entry. And as someone who has been a fan of Cardfight Vanguard for a very long time, these 5 decks look interesting. I'm super excited to pick up my own when they release. So my big recommendation is try and find these 5 decks. This is kind of an image of what they sort of look like in the packaging. Find your nearest card shop, for example. If you don't know if you have a local card shop or not, you can always just Google search card shops near me, and one will pop up. And travel to your nearest card shop and ask them about these decks. Ask them about Cardfight Vanguard Overdress start decks, and they should hopefully point you towards something like these, maybe give you a pre-order if they're not out yet, and maybe if they are out yet, they can just kind of get them for you. If you cannot find them in a card shop, then go and visit 50 Card Shop. I will put a link in the description. I'm not sponsored, but he is a friend of mine, so bear that in mind. And he is an online store that stocks Vanguard products, so he'll be more than happy to point you in the direction you should be going when it comes to purchasing new products. So, but only if you can't find stuff in your local card shop, I would recommend finding a local store first and foremost. So that's my advice. Those are very cheap $4 decks. They give you everything you need to fight in the box. Get some of those, get some other friends who are interested, have some fun afternoons playing some games. That's my #1 biggest piece of advice. And so from this point onwards, I'll be kind of telling you a bit more details about what the game is, how it works, and other elements like that. So if all you wanted to know was, this card game looks interesting, which product do I buy? It's these. Make sure they look like this, because there are trial decks too, and you don't want a trial deck, you want a start deck. The big difference will be the price, because these start decks, like I mentioned, are $4. The trial decks are closer to $15 generally. So you kind of want to go for these ones, and I'll explain why a little bit later on. So there we go. And that's an advert for the start decks. As I mentioned, they release on the 14th of May. If you don't mind playing with Japanese cards, so if you are Japanese, for example, then you can get 3 of these decks already right now. But you're going to have to wait a little longer to get the English versions. And here is the first Overdress set. Because as I mentioned, right now we're in the Overdress sort of format in Generation. And this is going to be the first big set that kind of accompanies it. So if you're looking for cards to update your start deck, to kind of add more cards to it, to make it a bit more consistent or better, or just more interesting, this is the set that you will be buying into. So if you are someone who wants to buy and open packs, this is the set I recommend. Genesis of the 5 Greats releases 21st of the 5th. So once again, go to your local card shop, see if you can pre-order or buy it. If you cannot, then go to 50 Card Shop. Link in the description, not sponsored, just a friend. And so the way the game works, we're going to ignore this top bit here for now, because as a new fan, that's too overcomplicated, you don't need to know it yet. For someone who's just starting off, you need to know this bottom bit. So the way Overdress Vanguard works is all of the decks are split into 6 different nations. This one here, Lyrical Monasterio, we don't really know too much about yet. So we're going to kind of just ignore that one for the sake of making things a little bit more simple. But as you saw earlier, there are 5 of the start decks, and each one represents these different nations. So if you're familiar with the card games, this will be pretty easy to learn, because how it works is each deck revolves around a different nation, and you kind of want to keep cards from the same nation together. So if you've got, if you think about something like Magic the Gathering or Pokemon, it has a very similar kind of thing. So you pick the one you like the most, and then you build a deck around it, basically. Or you get a start deck themed around it. So there you go. And this is what a card looks like. So this is what an Overdress card looks like. As you can see, there's a D in the corner. That is very important, because that tells you which format the card is from. Right now, as a beginner, you want to focus on the ones with the D, because that means they're from Overdress. And as you can see here on the card, you have the nation the card belongs to printed on it. It's a bit more subtle than the way Magic or Pokemon does it, but it is definitely there. So if the card you want to play with, like this, for example, is Dragon Empire, you want to make sure all the other cards in your deck are also Dragon Empire. There are some exceptions to this rule. But for the most part, yes, you want to have all of your cards have the same kind of color banner here in your deck. So there you go. And so how does the game work? Again, this isn't a tutorial, this is more of a premise. So basically the idea is that you are the leader or commander of your own army of units. And basically what you've got here in the middle of the top is your Vanguard, and then surrounding it are the Rare Guard units. And basically what you're doing is you're starting off with a really weak and small looking Vanguard. Each turn you're riding on top of it, which is when you stack a card on top of it. And that rides it, which makes it a higher grade and a more powerful unit. So basically you want your Vanguard, the one leading your army, to become as powerful as possible. And then you want to place out other cards surrounding it, kind of like this, as they will all support your Vanguard. They will make your Vanguard more powerful, they will protect your Vanguard, they will let you do extra attacks. That's basically the idea. You're trying to chain together combos consisting of different cards that will help your Vanguard lead you to victory. That is why it's called Cardfight Vanguard, because, well, you're fighting with cards and you have a Vanguard. It's very self-explanatory, and that's kind of how it works. There are other mechanics, like the trigger checks, but I kind of think it's more fun if you learn how the trigger checks work as you play your first game. So don't really think about that too much now. Basically, that's the gist of it. And of course, you have an anime. So as a new format of the card game comes, so too with it does an anime. Now, I've seen the first episode because of a special early premiere. It actually airs on the 3rd of April. So right now, as of time of this video, it's not technically out, but I have seen it. It's really good. You can see my review of it that I posted on my channel if you want more info. And it's really, really fun. So one thing that makes it stand out a lot, and probably the reason people are kind of getting interested in Vanguard, and maybe the reason you're watching this video, is the anime is different to what you would expect from a card game anime. It's not quite as colorful, it's a lot more down to earth, and most importantly, it's a seasonal, meaning it has 12 episodes and then a season-long hiatus, followed by another 13 episodes, and it's helmed by, well, Studio Clamp, who did a lot of the character designing and stuff for this series. So it's very story focused, it's very character focused, it's actually got genuinely good animation for this kind of thing, way better than you would expect. The first episode had an extended 2-minute long Sakuga scene that you can find on YouTube if you look for it. And it's really good. It's an anime, you know, like it doesn't feel like an advertisement. It feels like it's trying to tell its own story, and it's not wasting your time doing so. Generally, I'd be pretty skeptical of that, but as I mentioned, I've seen the first episode and it kind of blew me away with how good it was. So on the 3rd of April, you're gonna want to watch this. I'm pretty sure it's available on YouTube, and then it will also be available on pretty much every anime streaming service you're aware of. Things like Crunchyroll and Funimation will have it. And it's pretty good, basically. And you can kind of use it as a way of like seeing the units in action too. Danji here, if you can see, is he uses his deck in the first episode, and it's really cool. And in fact, the episode did such a good job of showing off his deck that on the day that episode premiered early, his deck sold out in Japan. So that's a sign of how good it is. So if you want to, like, if you're having a difficult time, like, choosing which deck you want to go with, just watch some of the Overdress anime, and you'll probably gravitate towards one of the characters, and so that can be the deck you'll build. So not only is it a genuinely really good story, but it also kind of helps you in regards to the card game too, which is really, really good, basically. So now we're going to go into a bit of a history lesson as to what the past of the franchise was like. So you don't really need to know any of the stuff I'm going to tell you as a beginner. Basically, all the stuff I said earlier about buying an Overdress start deck and watching the Overdress anime is what I genuinely do recommend, not just because it's new, but because it's specifically made to be beginner friendly and because it looks good, you know? So that's the stuff I recommend, but if you want a little bit more background as to what this franchise really has been like over the past decade, then this is going to be what it is. So Cardfight Vanguard premiered in 2011. This is the kind of key visual image they used to represent it, and what makes it stand out, it's around about 200 episodes, so it is very, very long, which is one of the reasons I like Overdress, because Overdress is a lot shorter, so if you're not willing to invest as much time into it, you can just skip straight to Overdress rather than worrying about, you know, binging through hundreds of episodes. And yes, Overdress is, as I mentioned, beginner friendly. You can start there. I quite like this anime, and what makes it stand out is it's more slice of lifey than something like Yu-Gi-Oh! Yu-Gi-Oh! Is very much a fantasy story first, and I still like Yu-Gi-Oh! But the cool thing about Cardfight Vanguard, especially this season, is it's very slow and slice of life focused. It's very much about this cast of characters learning to play the game, getting better at playing the game, and attending tournaments. So if you do just want to see these characters play with cards, this is actually a pretty good way of doing so. Now, of course, they're playing with the old cards from 2011, so if you're watching this for strategy, you're not going to get too much out of it, but I think it's pretty fun. But like I said, by design, it's kind of intentionally made to be slow paced. So if you don't have it in you to watch 200 or so episodes of not much happening, then I can totally kind of understand that. Next we have Cardfight Vanguard G, which, well, you've seen stuff like Yu-Gi-Oh, right? So if Yu-Gi-Oh had Yu-Gi-Oh GX, you can kind of guess what Cardfight Vanguard G is, right? It's a new series focused on a new set of protagonists, and whilst it does have some of the old characters come in and out here and there, it's mainly focused on the new stuff. This is where Vanguard gets the most shonen action-y of any Vanguard anime. So if you just want something kind of like Yu-Gi-Oh, this is the closest you're gonna get from it. And I quite like Vanguard G, but Vanguard G is around 150 episodes, so as I mentioned, it's a little bit difficult to recommend just because of how long it is. I still really like it, so if you're interested, go for it. But that's the thing that I like about Overdress, is you don't need to commit to how many episodes now, around 350, just to get caught up. So I do like it a lot, but yeah, it did introduce a new mechanic known as striding, where you will stride a more powerful grade 4 unit on top of your grade 3, and that's basically all you really need to know. That's not supposed to be there. And then we get to the bit where things get complicated. This is one of the reasons I didn't make a how to get into Vanguard video earlier, because this is a bit of a puzzling one. Basically, in 2018, Bushiroad decided to reboot Cardfight Vanguard back to the beginning again. And so we got the same storyline, or a similar storyline, retold. Not as good. I don't really like the reboot that much, but if you like the look of it, by all means, go ahead. It's quite a bit shorter than the 2011 anime, by quite a bit, actually. And it's like very much like tightened up and sped up, which I didn't really like, because I felt like that story was slow by design, so speeding it up kind of made it lose a lot of its appeal. But if you want to see like the same story or a similar story with slightly nicer animation, then by all means feel free to skip ahead to this. But if you don't like it, I recommend the 2011 one instead. So that's what happened there, and alongside it they also rebooted the card game too. So they kind of reprinted the old cards again with newer artwork and sometimes slightly different skills and abilities. So and that era of the card game is known as the V series era. So you kind of have 3 different big like formats of the card game. You've got what is known as premium. So let's kind of take a look here. So premium format is a format that can use any card ever printed, pretty much, other than the ban list, of course. So you can play with basically any card you own in premium. However, the thing is, premium tends to focus on the stride units that were introduced in Vanguard G. So you're generally going to want to be very experienced and well read up. This is the format for fans and people who have been fans for a while. It's got a bit of a learning curve to it. Obviously, don't let that scare you off if you're interested in it, but I definitely wouldn't recommend it as your first format. I would say Overdress is the format to start with. So that's one of the formats. Another format is this V Series Reboot format. You can tell whether or not a card belongs to the V Series because, as you saw here, when it loads, in the bottom left corner of the card. So if it has nothing here, then it's premium format. If it has a V here, it's V Series format. And as you can see here, if it has the D icon, then it's Overdress format. So there you go. Of course, you can use any card in premium, so you can actually, if you really wanted to, you could totally buy one of these 5-star decks and play it in premium, but you're probably not going to get very far. So basically, if you're playing with Overdress cards, for now at least, try to stick with playing against other people who are also playing Overdress. And of course, I also included this here too, because it felt important to mention, even though there's not really much to say about it, it felt important to mention after the 2018 reboot, they add a couple of spin-offs. Most notably is the Shenamon Arc. Like I said, there's not much to really say about it. In regards to whether or not I'd recommend you watch it, it's actually fairly short. It's around like 30 or so episodes. But I would only really recommend it if you already enjoyed the reboot, because there's a lot of lore and continuity stuff to do with it that, yeah. So one other thing to kind of talk about before we end this video off and summarize is the mobile game, Vanguard Zero. So Vanguard Zero is a mobile gacha game, and I've played a lot of it, so if you're interested in it, feel free to look up some videos on my channel, where basically you get to play the 2011 version of Cardfight Vanguard. It starts off with the very first set from 2011 and adds each set as it goes. Right now we're getting pretty far through, but it's still pretty beginner friendly. Now, the problem, and the reason I kind of hesitate to recommend this to new players, is that it does have a slightly different rule set. So if you're going from playing, like if you're learning Vanguard via this game and then you're moving to playing with Overdress cards, you're gonna be thrown off a bit. For example, you can't guard in Vanguard 0, which is one of the most important mechanics in the game, in my opinion. But if you're someone who just wants to kind of have a feel for the game, it's a free app, so you definitely can just download it, play it for a few minutes, and see whether or not you like it. It does have a built-in tutorial that teaches you quite a lot of how Vanguard works and will kind of give you a feel for it. I would definitely recommend it if you're interested and just want to play some games for free as a beginner. Obviously, again, it doesn't represent Vanguard as a whole. It is a gacha game, so go into it with those expectations. It is not a true representation of what Vanguard is, but it's kind of fun, you know? So if you want to kind of dip your toes in, that's definitely an option for sure. And so kind of to sum up, basically, Overdress is where to start, basically. So the new cards are very different to the old ones, but also very beginner friendly and very cool looking. Again, as someone who's been a fan of the franchise for a very long time, these excite me too, you know, and I'm looking forward to playing with them. These are the decks and cards that will get support for years to come in the future. And as I mentioned, they're just a lot of fun to play and collect, and they've got the anime coming up soon to go along with them. So as far as I'm aware, that's basically everything I kind of wanted to sort of convey. So that's Cardfight Vanguard. If you're a beginner, I'd recommend look into the Overdress stuff and stick to the Overdress stuff until you're a bit more familiar. Then after that, kind of dip your toes into premium as you see fit. And as I mentioned, those starter decks are really, really cheap. So once they release, you'll definitely want to get your hands on at least one of them. But as I mentioned, my biggest recommendation is have a friend or a group of friends who are also interested. Watch the first episode of the Overdress anime with them. And then if you enjoy them, go and pick up those decks and kind of just have an afternoon of playing some games with the decks. They're so cheap that you can probably afford to just get all 5 of them and then have you and your group of friends kind of switch between and rotate between all of them. And that sounds like a lot of fun, you know? That's what I would recommend in regards to getting into Cardfight Vanguard. So that's basically all I have for you here. I hope I managed to kind of make all of that information digestible and understandable enough to a new fan. Obviously, there is a lot more to Vanguard than just that, but I think I've given you enough information that you'll be able to figure out the rest on your own as you play and watch. So there you go. If you're still interested in Vanguard and want to know more, I make Vanguard videos on a fairly regular basis, so feel free to subscribe to me and watch some of my other videos. And I'll see you later with some more. And remember, for every statement, there's always an asterisk. See ya.